Welcome to another episode of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. A progressive and populist insight into Michigan's political and cultural world. And of course, an entertaining show on how to make Michigan's political machine work for the people, and not just the elite few. Now, from the Left of Lansing headquarters from his mid-Michigan attic, it's time for the award-winning Pat Johnston. It's all yours, Pat.
Yeah, welcome to another edition of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I am Pat Johnston, and to quote C-3PO in Return of the Jedi, well, here we go again. Another Middle Eastern war, another waste of human life and human treasure, but hey, good news. For just $10,000, you can speak at the MAGA Michigan Republican Convention on March 28th. That's all you need is just $10,000 to throw around. Maybe it's under your couch, under your bed, under your mattress, wherever. Just for $10,000, you can speak your mind at the Republican Convention here in Michigan. And with that $10,000, you get to talk for 5 minutes. And for 5 minutes, you can spew whatever nonsense you've got, including how Trump and Vance are really the peace candidates. You could also talk about how transgender women scare you in the locker rooms, but how you trust your kids in the same bathroom as dear leader Trump, a man found liable for sexual assault and who's doing whatever it takes to protect his billionaire pedophile friends in the Epstein files. And you could also talk about how much it warms your heart and how much you just love watching an ICE Gestapo agent murdering American protesters because a protester legally held firearms. From my cold, dead hands, I remember that. You could also talk about how much you want to ensure that those in Michigan who are part of the Epstein Class, like the DeVos family, should receive more tax breaks. You could talk about how, Michigan Democrats overreached when they voted to ban child marriage, while at the same time declaring how you're normal but drag queens are not. You could talk about how it's super awesome to cut funding for the RX Kids program across the state, a program that helps parents and newborn kids while also proclaiming to be pro-life. You could talk about how gutting food stamps, Medicaid, and healthcare coverage rocks, but that you are really a good Christian nationalist. You could talk about how super awesome it is that the Trump regime blocked funding for clean energy jobs, which of course means more unemployed working class people here in the state. You could spend your 5 minutes celebrating how the billionaire Maroon family, which owns the Ambassador Bridge in Detroit, joined hands with the Trump regime in blocking a public bridge from being opened, a bridge that Canada paid to build. Then you could also spend your 5 minutes hating on Canada, but then tell the MAGA delegates in the crowd there how we have to stick it to those weenie liberals up in northern Michigan who want to shut down the Line 5 Canadian oil pipeline, a pipeline that transports Canadian oil. You could talk about how measles are cool, or why Congresswoman Lisa McClain's insider trading is a win for the working class, how those suffering from the after effects of last year's ice storm in northern Michigan is really the fault of immigrants, or you could just blame immigrants for welfare programs, and then at the same time blame immigrants for buying up expensive housing in Michigan. Doesn't make sense to normal people, but it might with that MAGA crowd. You could also talk about how much you despise socialism, but then love Elon Musk and his tech bros getting massive government contracts and tax breaks. You could talk about why it's so awesome that 70% of public school teachers around the country need a side job as Republicans continue to work to gut their pay and the schools where they teach. You could talk about why Michigan must erase free meals at public schools because that's socialism, but how we have to funnel taxpayer dollars to unaccountable for-profit charter schools. And you could propose a resolution praising State Representative Jamie Thompson from Brownstown Township, who apparently paid her son Jackson more than $24,000 in consulting fees from 2024 through 2025 for canvassing and general counseling. Oh, it's always nice when nepotism can play a role, isn't it? What a loving family. By the way, her son still collected money after being arrested and charged with domestic violence in Wayne County last September, according to the Detroit News. Ah, yes, you just have to love family values. Now, his trial is next month, and yes, everyone is presumed innocent. But isn't it lovely how those who claim government is evil, socialism is evil, they're the ones who tend to be the ones to use government to make money. And we're seeing that with the tech bros. Anyway, you can do that and more with $10,000 at the Michigan Republican Convention next month. Now, here's one thing, though. Here's one thing. I'm guessing you won't be hearing much about the Epstein files a whole lot during that convention either, or how much we have to protect kids. Nah, I don't think you'll be hearing a whole lot of that talk. Remember, you can always email me at leftoflansing@gmail.com. Coming up here in a few moments, Erica Payne from Patriotic Millionaires will join me. Now, Patriotic Millionaires has some ideas, some really good ideas on how best to strengthen the working class here in the United States while also taxing the rich, so that way we can maybe even up the sacrificing here a bit in our economy, an economy that is benefiting the Epstein class but is not benefiting the working class. So stick around for my talk with Erica Payne here in just a few. Hey, getting back to that Line 5 shutdown, the fight to shut down Line 5 in the Straits of Mackinac, the Canadian pipeline owner, named Enbridge, announced last week that it was beginning work on rerouting an aging oil pipeline around the tribal reservation in northern Wisconsin after 7 years of legal wrangling, moving ahead despite 2 new lawsuits that could still delay the project indefinitely. And the Associated Press continues by saying about 12 miles of Enbridge's Line 5 pipeline runs across the Bad River Band of Lake Superior's reservation along the shores of Lake Superior. So Enbridge is basically saying, all right, yeah, we can still maybe fight this in courts, but we're just going to move that stretch of the pipeline. We'll move it around so we don't have to do this anymore. And I find that very, very interesting because that means, hey, pipelines can be moved after all. And I'm saying that just to remind you how Michigan's Democratic Attorney General, Dana Nessel, took her fight to close down the nearly 70-year-old pipeline to the Supreme Court of the United States here recently. And again, that Canadian pipeline owner named Enbridge argued in the Supreme Court that the state of Michigan has no power to shut down the pipeline since it travels internationally, since it's a multinational corporation, I guess. Enbridge says that means the fight must be settled in federal court. That's where Enbridge wants this fight. Nessel and the state of Michigan say it should be in state court and that Enbridge is just trying to get the case to federal court to get a more favorable outcome. Yeah, you think? Plus, they argued that Enbridge waited for more than 2 years to make this move, which an appeals court recently said was a no-go. As David Holtz writes in The Current on Substack, he says, this isn't about pipeline safety regulations. It's about whether a state can invoke its own laws to defend waters that belong to its citizens, in this case, the Great Lakes. Yeah, that's what it is all about, sports fans, to paraphrase the late, great Robert Duvall. This is about if we, in the state of Michigan, have any say over our natural resources against a corporation. And we're seeing that same fight play across the state and the country as billionaire tech bro AI data centers are popping up everywhere. And of course, naturally, the energy monopolies in Michigan, DTE and Consumers Energy, are strong backers for these data centers. And good news, everyone, good news. Just days after the Michigan Public Service Commission okayed another DTE rate hike a few weeks ago, DTE said it was going to ask for another rate hike of $242 million. Hey, you got to hand it to them. You just have to hand it to them because why wouldn't they? When have they ever been stopped? Doesn't it make you feel like a true American knowing how DTE spends money to bribe Lansing politicians and that Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer's Michigan Public Service Commission keeps greenlighting these hikes? And the MPSC also greenlit that massive hyperscale AI data center in Saline recently, even though the town there doesn't want it. The working class is getting squeezed and feels like it has no power to stop the corporate authoritarian and takeover of this country. It's no wonder why working class Michiganders from the left and the right are coming together to resist these data centers. In fact, we're also seeing the working class in cities and towns across the state stand up and protest against having the Trump regime's ICE Gestapo setting up their concentration camps in their communities as well. I mean, we've seen it in Southfield, and now we've also seen it in Romulus. But then there's former Michigan Attorney General and current Republican candidate for governor Mike Cox spewing his mediocre MAGA dribble by saying, we should just let ICE build concentration camps in our towns because, hey, it could mean jobs. But wait a second, Mike Cox. Wait a second, Cox. I thought that was bad because, you see, that would be a government job. Government equals socialism. Government equals communism. Government jobs are bad. I mean, isn't that what you MAGA types told us when Elon Musk was doging and gutting thousands of government jobs? So then what you're saying, Mike Cox, is there are times that government jobs are good. And speaking of government being a job creator, the Trump regime has gotten the United States engaged in yet another war in the Middle East, the third in my lifetime. Yay. At least 780 Iranians have been killed since the Trump regime and Israel's right-wing government began its war on Iran. And the Trump regime's Secretary of State, little Marco Rubio, essentially said this week that the U.S. had to get involved since, Israel was going to attack anyway, so I guess we had to join them. So yeah, whenever Israel says they're going to do something, the Trump regime says, oh, okay, we'll follow. Yeah, okay, the U.S. killed the Ayatollah, which tells me that if we knew exactly where that 80-plus-year-old man was going to be, we could pinpoint it to the dot, then we damn well knew that Iran wasn't close to harming Israel or America, and that Iran wasn't close to making a nuclear bomb. Meanwhile, 6 American service members have been killed, and it's just sickening to my stomach to know that they died for the Epstein Class, the billionaire Epstein Class with defense contractors and oil barons. And yes, they died for Israel's right-wing government, which has been pushing for full war in Iran for my entire lifetime. It made me ill just as much, and I'm being honest here, all right? It made me ill just as much to see so many weak responses to the Trump regime's war in another Middle Eastern country by Democrats. Democrats just did not know how to handle this, and it wasn't hard. For example, we had Michigan Democratic Congresswoman Hillary Scholten from the west side of the state say this in the statement. She said, the Iranian regime possesses a profound threat to the U.S. interest, to Israel and our Gulf partners and global security. How, Congresswoman? How? Explain. I'd love to know. Were American lives in sudden danger? You see, Congresswoman, when you sound like that, you sound just like the Trump regime. And let me just go off on just a little tangent here, but I just have to tell you that it makes my blood boil to hear these supporters of the Iran war say, hey, isn't it great that we're going in and that we're destroying a regime that killed and imprisoned protesters? You mean kind of like what the regime here in this country is doing to protesters, or how it is arresting and charging members of the press? Is that the kind of freedom we're talking about here, everyone? I'm sorry about it. I don't have any time for that kind of talk. Now, compare Congresswoman Hillary Scholten's statement to that of MAGA Michigan Republican Congressman Tom Barrett, who said, and I'm quoting here, the Iranian regime is directly responsible for the murder of thousands of American civilians and soldiers, including friends of mine, during our 2-decade war on terror. And then he said, if this regime had acquired a nuclear weapon, then we would not have to wonder how they would use it. There was no nuclear weapon, and we had a nuclear deal with Iran thanks to President Obama, but that got obliterated by Trump during his first term, Congressman. And please don't get us started talking about the war on terror and how much of a waste and how much of a drain on our treasure that was. I don't even want to go through that right now, and how it also obliterated many of our individual freedoms in this country. Anyway, did you really hear any daylight in those two responses from the Democrat and from the Republican? I have to tell you, I didn't. I mean, again, one was a Democrat and one was a MAGA Republican. Didn't hear much of a difference there. I mean, you've had many establishment corporate Democrats who didn't say or haven't said that they're really against this war, but they will then try to say, okay, well, we're against the process of how this war started. He should have at least come to us first. What? No. Democratic leaders like Senator Chuck Schumer was upset that dear leader didn't make his case in front of Congress and in front of Chuck Schumer. Meanwhile, just 7% of Democrats in a Reuters poll said that they support this war. 7%. Now, Detroit Progressive Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib said the following after the bombing began. She said, Congress must stop the bloodshed by immediately reconvening to exert its war powers and stop this deranged president. But let's be clear, warmongering politicians from both parties support this illegal war, and it will take a mass anti-war movement to stop it. Oh, trust me, you can go on social media and you can just read the hatred, you can read the racism, and you can read the Islamophobia whenever she posts any kinds of statement. But I have a feeling that Rashida Tlaib is speaking for the 74% of Democrats and a plurality of independents who are against this war. Let's talk about another Michigan Democrat, Democratic Senator Alyssa Slotkin, and she was answering this question posted by Distill Social's Norris, and he asked if she would vote to support a war on Iran. And, well, here's her answer.
Will you vote to support a war in Iran?
So, the president talked about it for a couple of sentences yesterday. The U.S. Congress in the Constitution was given the power to approve declaring war. But since the Iraq war back in 2002, basically, they haven't really taken the power seriously because they don't want to get involved. I have voted on many war powers resolutions and voted against the acts of going to war. The president needs to actually come and make his case to Congress. It doesn't count to do it for a couple sentences in the State of the Union. I'm on the Armed Services Committee. So I will look at whatever they purport to be doing, but I certainly know from 3 tours in Iraq that it's easier to get into a war than to get out of one. So I would not vote to support that unless I understood what our actual goals were.
I'm not sure what that was. It sounded like a lot of word salad to me, and it was not a clear answer. I think deep down, Alyssa Slotkin really wanted this war, but she's a Democrat, and she knows that a lot of people are against it, so she has to use all kinds of words and phrases and talk about decorum and talk about process. And just as I'm recording this, we learn the United States Senate has voted against reeling in dear leader Trump's and Israel's war on Iran by voting to block the War Powers Resolution. Slotkin and fellow Michigan Democratic Senator Gary Peters each voted in favor of blocking Trump's war, but Democrats needed more votes on their side, as, of course, Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman voted with Republicans, voted with the authoritarian Trump regime. And I guess this is something. One Republican, though, Kentucky's Rand Paul, did join Democrats on that vote. Regardless, the war goes on as Congress just doesn't want its constitutional duties to control whether or not we go to war. But before you praise Alyssa Slotkin and the Democrats in the Senate, Politico is reporting that since we are now in war, some Democrats will quickly give in and okay $50 billion in spending for this little war. And here's what Slotkin told Politico, and I'm quoting here, "I need to know the goals and the plan. I don't rule anything out. I mean, we're in it." Yeah, we're in it, Senator. Which means, I guess, there's just nothing you can do about it. There's just nothing we can do to get out of it. And there you have it, sports fans. Once they get you forever in the war machine. No, there's only really one good answer, and that is no war with Iran. Perhaps they should start sounding like progressive Democratic candidate for Congress here in Michigan, William Lawrence, who could take on Congressman Tom Barrett later on this fall. And William Lawrence's statement on the Trump regime's war on Iran said the following, and it was very clear. William Lawrence said, "Americans across the political spectrum, Democrat, Republican, and Independent, are speaking out against this pointless and reckless war, which is a waste of money and human life. This is not a tough call, politically or ethically. Time is of the essence." Very well done there by William Lawrence. And he's right. This is not a hard thing to do. It is the right thing to do by calling this regime's war as illegal and wrong. It's also not America first. It's not. It's just not America first to be starting overseas wars for regime change or for whatever reason the Trump regime gives. I mean, it's given us 5 different reasons so far why it decided to attack Iran. The real America first stance is to be against this war and for fixing the working class in this country. Enough money for overseas wars that'll make defense contractors and Israel's right-wing government happy. Enough of that. It is time to take care of the working class in this country and start holding the Epstein Class accountable. Time is of the essence, as William Lawrence said, and it is now time for us to elect the right people in office, whether it be in local government, whether it be in state government or national office. It is time to elect the right people in office so that way we, the working class, can be a priority for a change. You're listening to LOL.
A working class voice for the working class. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. If you'd like to tell Pat what you think of the show and maybe even congratulate him for providing podcasting excellence, oh brother, email him at leftoflansing@gmail.com. If you have an idea for a guest or a topic for a future show, email him at leftoflansing@gmail.com. We'd like to thank you for listening and for helping spread the progressive message in the Mitten State and beyond. Now, here's Pat Johnston.
Well, I'm happy to introduce once again Erica Payne, founder and CEO of Patriotic Millionaires, and who's also the author of Tax the Rich, How Lies, Loopholes, and Lobbyists Make the Rich Even Richer. She was on the show here last year, and I'm so grateful that she's able to come back again. So, Erica Payne, thanks so much for joining us here on Left of Lansing this week.
So happy to be here.
Well, when I originally contacted you to be on the show a few weeks ago, the United States was not engaged in another war in the Middle East, and now we are, of course. And it's just something that I talked about here just before bringing you on. I always find it amazing that when it comes to providing some kind of programs for the struggling working class in this country, be it decent health care coverage or maybe a living wage or programs that provide, just a little basic assistance like food stamps or Medicaid or free meals in public schools, we're always told that we have to show our work and we have to tell everybody how we're going to pay for such programs. But yet when it comes to war, we don't really have to show that kind of work, or we don't really have to ask how we pay for it. And I think that exists when it comes to this because we got billionaire companies who provide weaponry and supplies for wars. And we're talking big, big money here, which backs, of course, politicians in both parties. So we never ask, how we're going to pay for wars while the working class programs get cut and the standard of living for the working class continues to suffer. Am I wrong in viewing the game in this way?
Well, look, Pat, I think the fact that you're asking is somebody asking. And so what we need to encourage in people listening to your show is more people asking that question. There are a lot of questions. And listen, I am no foreign policy expert, and I do not work for an organization that focuses on foreign policy. So I'm going to be very limited in what I have to say about this. Number one, whatever costs are associated with what is actually a war happening right now, if that is something the country needs to do, wealthy people need to pay for it. Right now, the working class are paying for what seems to be a nonsensical war, number one. Number two, I think we need to really look at decision-making power. It has been widely reported that Saudi encouraged President Trump to make this preemptive act. Right. I want to understand why a Saudi government is weighing in to that extent with our president, and also why they gave $2 billion to Jared Kushner's private equity fund. And I'd also like to know in the process why it is that our government is about to approve them buying Electronic Arts, which is a huge gaming platform. But more importantly, like when you say gaming platform, what you don't understand is that it's really an incredibly sticky social media platform. And so we've got a deal where the Saudis are sending us to war. The Saudis are fixing to buy a big chunk of our connective tissue as a society with this giant social media platform kind of wrapped up in a gaming apparatus, and they're using the president's son-in-law as a whitewashing of the entire exercise. And so all of these things need to be questioned simultaneously. And so I'm really glad that you are questioning those things on this show and encouraging people in your network to do the same.
You said the word connected. And, before this war even started, we were spending a lot of time talking about the Jeffrey Epstein files. And while Erica, of course, all of the gross and disgusting stories about these elites taking part, or at least, having knowledge about Epstein's child sex trafficking ring rightfully takes up most of the headlines. The files, I think, also gave us some insight into how this cabal of billionaires and political elites are so, what's the word, interconnected, I guess maybe, and feel like they don't really have to play by the same rules. Now, in other countries, we are seeing how those implicated in these files are paying somewhat of a price. Prince Philip, obviously, being an example, but others as well. Yet here in this country, that doesn't seem to be happening. I mean, we have people within the president's cabinet we have their names in there who've been caught even lying about their relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and yet they are still there. And to make it even more frustrating, I think, for those of us here in the working class, we also then gave these same people massive tax breaks in that so-called big beautiful bill last year. Do you have the same feelings, Erica? And were you at all shocked by seeing how interconnected these people really are?
I mean, I think on some level, if you're not shocked, you have to be dead inside. I mean, it's like how deep the rot. Pat, this is absolutely repulsive. It's a culture of corruption and misogyny and abuse and cruelty and a lack of empathy. And here's the thing. It's not just within like the effects on the individuals. Let's look at two examples of the effect on the system in which we are attempting to live with one another. Okay. Brad Karp was the head of Paul Weiss. He just had to step down like 2 weeks ago when all of his involvement with Epstein came out. So he's had to step down from the chairmanship. Keep in mind, he's still at the firm. So he's still making all the money. He's just not the chairman anymore. But so who is Brad Karp and why do we care? Well, let's go back to the beginning of Trump 2, when Trump started going after the law firms. Who's the first law firm that Trump went after? The first law firm that Trump went after was Paul Weiss. Paul Weiss was headed by Brad Karp. At that point, there was every reasonable possibility for people to think that the Epstein files were not going to come out, because keep in mind that Massey, the congressman, and Ro Khanna had not yet done their discharge petition. Nobody knew it was going to happen. So Brad Karp is leading this enormous law firm, the first one that got attacked, and Brad Karp acquiesced immediately in a way that was of note at the time. Every other law firm commenting on this first attack of the Trump administration was commenting on the fact that Brad Karp led Paul Weiss to the greatest capitulation, no fight, total abject capitulation. And then you come to find out, a few months later, that the guy's all over the Epstein files. I think that there is exactly zero possibility that those two things are not connected. That's number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, let's just talk about what is the culture? What is the ideology that rules individuals in this orbit? Alex Acosta was the Secretary of Labor for Trump 1. He was in charge of basically the deal between business and working Americans. Okay, the Secretary of Labor, the person in charge of policies around labor, people who work. This is the guy who gave Jeffrey Epstein the sweetheart deal that had him as a sex offender, a registered convicted sex offender. He served 13 months in jail and he only had to spend the night there. That is the deal that the future Secretary of Labor had. So there are 100,000 stories like this. Okay. And this kind of corruption only works if it's both sides of the political aisle. But when people reduce it to the abuse of the humans, which is critical, but that abuse is pervasive up from that to the system of our engagement with one another. And those are the pieces that we also have to understand, which is why it's so critical that these people be held to account for their behavior. And they need to basically be ostracized, kicked out of polite society for the rest of eternity, removed from their board positions. Their money needs to be removed from them. They need to be criminally convicted, and they cannot be in positions of power anymore. That's it.
I have to say that when it comes to also the issue of sacrificing, I always love hearing, how the working class is told that they're the ones who have to sacrifice, when it comes to, austerity measures, or that when it comes to tax cuts, that, hey, we're going to have to cut programs. It's time for the working class to have to sacrifice, and it's time for them to work harder. But I never really hear the elites or the Epstein class, as I call them, thanks, Congressman Ro Khanna, by the way, I never hear how they are told to have to sacrifice. And right now we're seeing this K-shaped economy where those at the top are doing very well and the rest of us are not doing as well. And Erica, you have been an advocate to have the rich, you have to do a little sacrificing here a little bit. And that's through taxation. And that's really one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on here. So can you share some of your ideas there with Patriotic Millionaires?
Well, 100%. But I want to go back to where you started, where the working class is asked to sacrifice and nobody else is.
Sure.
Look, Jeff Bezos got off his rocket ship from his joyride in space, and he thanked the employees of Amazon for the trip. Why did he thank them? Because he basically underpays. If you look at just the actual cost of living for a single adult with no children in whatever area of their country looking in, and then look at the job listings that Amazon has, that company underpays by somewhere 20 to 30%, just the median cost of living for a single adult with no children. Every single bit of that money that Jeff Bezos spent on that rocket came out of the pockets of people working at Amazon. Period. So that's bad enough. Okay. So nobody's sacrificing. People are being exploited in order for billionaires to go on joyrides into space. That's what's happening. Okay. And then on the K-shaped economy, that's K for kill the business community, period. Because right now we've got consumer demand is being driven by people at the top, and they're now accounting for 50% of the spending. It used to be that the average consumer demand was 70% of the economy. And so we have consumers now with less money to spend, which over time is going to kill the business climate, period. And so this K-shaped economy is ultimately, it feels good, really good for rich people right now. In the long term, this is going to be very bad for everybody.
Well, and that's the part, Erica, that I don't get, is that I was always told that these are the smartest people in the world. They're the most
you could
successful.
be really smart and completely immoral at the same time. So they may be really smart. First of all, they're not particularly smarter than other people. The Harvard Business Review did a big survey several years ago to find the commonalities between people of great material success. What were the common traits? Were they risk-loving, risk-averse? Were they well-educated, not well-educated? The single only common characteristic that they found in people of great material wealth was a willingness to live in the ethical gray area. People who were willing to bend the rules to their own favor. That is the common characteristic. And so that's fine. People who want to behave immorally in the world, we're not going to ever get rid of them. The devil is alive and well and living among us. The point is that we have to have power structures that prevent the damage from being so much that we can't deal with it, right? And we've got an economy right now where, first of all, billionaires are taking joyrides in space while people who work for them are sleeping in their cars. And then on the back end, we actually charge them half as much on their tax bill as we charge working people. I mean, there are so many absurdities in the tax code to begin with. But the biggest absurdity right from the get-go, their money versus your sweat. Every single dollar that a billionaire investor makes is worth more than every single dollar that a working person makes because of the tax code. If you make ordinary income, money from a job, you pay twice the tax rate of people who make money off of their investments. That's the original sin of the tax code. Then you get into, we have trillion-dollar corporations who don't pay the cost of living. That's an easy fix. Attach a tax penalty to major corporations that pay less than the cost of living. And so over time, that moves their behavior. They will up their wages. Because this is not just about redistribution. It's about pre-distribution. It's first and foremost about making sure that working people make money for the work they do that makes other people money. That's it. Working people need to make a fair share of the proceeds of business because they are doing work making other people money.
What doesn't make sense to me, though, is how come they don't look at it that way? I feel like if you had a stronger working class, that would then create bigger demand, and that would help these corporations in the long run. And that's what I just don't get.
Well, you have to look at how incentive structures work when things are different for different parties. Right. And so corporations, we started this talking about the Epstein Class. They live by a certain special set of rules that nobody else lives by. And so if you're in a situation where you continue to give elites a lot of special treatment, then they create systems that reinforce that special treatment because they have enough power to reinforce the system. Right. And so Walmart executives, for example, are paid on profits. Profits are calculated after costs like labor. And so if we have the labor costs go up, their bonuses will go down. And so they have an incentive to keep the labor costs as low as possible. And then they just want to sprinkle around enough charitable programs that the pain is not so intense that people overthrow, the entire system. And we're in a situation now where they've overplayed their hand. The great business leaders have actually overplayed their hand. They have become they're just nothing but human exploitation scheme. This is not business. This is, sucking the lifeblood out of human beings like little vampires and riding off into the sunset on your jet. It's disgusting.
So then what are some solutions that you would have then, when it comes to taxing the rich? Obviously, it's something that, you've heard politicians, especially progressive politicians like Bernie Sanders for years has been pushing. It seems like since 2016, since his presidential run, you are actually starting to see that idea really become, I think, embraced, not just by the working class, but I think you're actually seeing it within politics, too, a bit more. So what would be some ideas that you would have then to tax the rich and make them have a little bit more skin in the game?
Well, yeah. And let me just say, Patriotic Millionaires came together 16 years ago and said, for the good of the country, President Obama raised my taxes. And people had never heard such a thing. We're now in a place where we are having a fantastic public discussion about how this whole economy of ours is structured. And I want to be clear, this is not about being punitive. This is about ultimately creating an economic system that allows all of us to live together in reasonable peace and harmony. I mean, that's it, so that everybody can go on about their business. So this is not about taxing somebody because, we're mad at them. It is ultimately, we have to structure an economy in such a way that we are all capable of being in community with one another. So Patriotic Millionaires have some very simple ideas. Number one, if you make less than $1 million in income, or you are worth, so-called, if you control less than 5 million in assets, you are not paying higher taxes as far as we are concerned forever. Into eternity. The end. You have done your part. Okay. That's number one. Number two, we're in this exercise so that people can be rich, stable, and free. We want to live in a rich, stable, and free country. So here's what you got to do. Everybody's income gets treated equally. It doesn't matter how you make it. If you make it from inheritance, you make it from investments, or you make it from work. Everybody's equal. Okay. That's number one. Number two, we need to eliminate the federal income tax for people up to the cost of living. You need to be able to support yourself with a roof over your head and food in your mouth before you need to contribute any more to the federal coffers, because you're already paying all kinds of state taxes, local taxes, sales taxes, tariff taxes. You're done. Okay, for the time being, let's eliminate that federal income tax and shift it to people like our members with incomes over $1 million. That's a cost of living tax cut. That's what we want. And third, let's create a cost of living mandate for major corporations. If you make, call it $10 million a year, you should be required by law to pay people something they can actually live on, and there should be a tax penalty if you don't. And if we do those three things, this is the money agenda, Pat, the money agenda. If you just look up Patriotic Millionaires, the money agenda, people should join Team Money. We've got people all over the country buying into this economic framework. And our goal over the next 2 years is to make it the defining framework in the presidential campaign.
What I like about your ideas there, again, it kind of goes back to what I asked just a little bit ago, the idea of sacrificing. And in a way, because again, the working class is always asked to do some sacrificing. You're not really asking those at the top to sacrifice a lot. You're just asking them, hey, just do a little bit more.
Well, and here's the thing. I'm sick of asking them. It's time they were told your money is not better than anybody else's money. Yes, you can run a business, but no, you cannot run a human exploitation scheme. And you know what? You've made $80 trillion of the working class's money since 1975 with this great shift of all the money from productivity went through the roof, wages stayed flat. That's $80 trillion. You know what we're going to do for the time being? You're going to pick up a little more so the working class can get by. And we're going to start there. And then we're going to deal with the gigantic cancer that has metastasized across the world, which is this oligarchical concentration of wealth and the techno-fascists who are attempting to take over the world. That's the big problem. But let's get in place 3 basic, bold, but quite simple ideas that will stabilize the working class and establish an appropriate relationship between business and the people who work for those businesses.
Yeah. Just one more question. We have a ballot initiative or a proposal that would put a 5% surcharge tax on millionaires here in our state of Michigan to help rebuild the state's public education fund that was decimated for years, Erica, here. And I believe Massachusetts passed a similar law, and that law is now on the books in that state, and Massachusetts is doing better. We've got some big-name billionaires in this state, I'm sure you're aware of, like the DeVos family, for instance, and they are completely against such a proposal. Are proposals like this, like just one way that, since things aren't happening fast on the federal government side, is this one way that states could fight back and try to even up that playing field?
100%. There's all kinds of room in the state for states to make progress on ending the exploitation of the country by the Epstein Class. And there are lots of states doing that. And the best thing that governors could do, so your governor wants to be president, Gavin Newsom wants to be president. Gavin Newsom in California is actively campaigning against what they're trying to do to billionaires. I can't remember where your governor stands on it, but I'm not a huge fan of your governor because she kind of sucks for working people. And what she did with your minimum wage law was absolutely one of the most disgusting acts of political cowardice that I have ever seen, that directly affected the economic health of people in your state. I was sick of that. And I think, in my opinion, both of those characters are have disqualified themselves for the presidency, period. But be that as it may, this proposal that y'all have in Michigan, you mentioned one in Massachusetts when they raised taxes on millionaires in Massachusetts. We actually had more millionaires in the state. It was very helpful. You know, there are proposals going around New York right now, you know, blah, 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 blah. This is the best thing that ever happened. And what ultimately we could do is do an interstate compact between a bunch of the interesting states, and that could serve as the beginning of correcting this oligarchical wealth concentration while we deal with it on a federal and constitutional level if necessary.
I love that idea of maybe this could start a compact of states getting together. Yeah, I do like that idea a lot. No, it's something maybe I'll be pushing from now on if you don't mind.
No, do. And the thing is, and here's the thing, Gavin Newsom, I respect his ability to disagree with certain elements of a proposal. But what he did was he disagreed with it completely, and he did not offer an appropriate or any alternative. Right. And so these leaders, if they're going to lead, they need to lead. Our economy is structured in such a way that guarantees the downfall of our nation, as we are watching right now. Nobody has any business assuming the White House presidency in whatever year it'll be, 2029, if they don't have a concrete plan to fix this economy, period. And it's not that difficult.
No, it's not that difficult, or it shouldn't be that difficult. You're talking about Gavin Newsom. I'm not exactly sure what he's doing. You brought up our governor, Gretchen Whitmer. And as far as I know, Erica, I don't believe she has stated whether or not she is for that ballot initiative that I mentioned here to you. At least
Shockingly.
Right. But I think that shows, first of all, we're lucky to live in a state here in Michigan that we do have this ballot initiative process, because nothing is going to really happen quickly to help the working class in such a way, or at least to somewhat even up the playing field a little bit on the federal side. And of course, in our state capital, Lansing, it hasn't really been happening there either. So this is a good way for the working class, for the citizens to actually make some change to try to even up the playing field a little bit economically. So I guess that leads to my final question. It just shows, I think, that we are in a populist mood in this country. Is this the most populist you have seen this country become in the last, 40, 50 years?
I mean, I'm 56. It's as most populist as I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and good. I mean, this is the great reckoning and the great correction. We just have to get through this period to the other side. And here's the thing, Pat, the other side is going to be great. I mean, this is not particularly complicated. We live in a fantastic country. We've let the money get out of control, which is no shock because people are greedy and they want their stuff, and it's fine. Everybody settle down. But now it's out of control. Now we need to fix it. Let's fix it. It's relatively easy to fix it. Let's raise wages. Let's tax the rich a bit. Let's reshift the tax burden around. And then let's deal with the fact that we have a concentration of wealth, and those people at some point are going to need to have that wealth taken away from them. Democracy cannot coexist with a trillionaire. That is the end of the sentence. And so therefore we need to not have trillionaires, because guess what? Human beings, human freedom, and democracy, all of those things are more important than billionaires.
If people would like to learn more about Patriotic Millionaires and all of your work, how can they do so?
patrioticmillionaires.org, and the money agenda is right there front and center. So go on, read about it, and then join Team Money. We have a big grassroots arm of our work. And so together we can fix this. We have got a lot of exciting stuff coming up in the next few months.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining the show here again this week. And thanks again for just lending your powerful and important voice in this fight to help the working class. We greatly appreciate it. Erica Payne, founder and CEO of Patriotic Millionaires. And please come back on again.
I will. Thanks, Pat.
You're listening to Michigan's premier progressive podcast. It's Left of Lansing. Subscribe and give a good review of the show wherever you're listening. You can check out show archives on leftoflansing.com. And if you need more Pat, visit Left of Lansing on YouTube. Now, here's Pat Johnston.
Hey, special thanks to Erica Payne from Patriotic Millionaires for being on the show this week. I always love it when she's on because she brings lots of energy and lots of passion. And do you think I should have asked Erica again how she really feels about Gretchen Whitmer? Oh, man. I mean, look, I obviously support some big moves that Gretchen has made in the past, and she signed some bills that I supported, even though I believe that, she kind of may have been pushed into some of those bills. But yeah, there have been places where, and we've talked about it here on the show many times, that Big Gretchen has made some errors, made some grave errors, and didn't really fight to move the political needle or move the Overton window. And I know sometimes when I've attacked Gretchen Whitmer or criticized Gretchen Whitmer here, especially in the last year and a half or so, that has angered some listeners. But hey, I'm sorry, I have to call it as I'm seeing it, and we have to always press for better. Fighting to cut that pay leave and minimum wage law in half last year showed me that she didn't support the working class in that moment. And if I'm wrong, please tell me if Whitmer has come out in support of the Invest in My Kids ballot initiative that would once again place a 5% surcharge tax on millionaires in the state to help generate around $5 to $7 billion into public education. Again, as I was talking about with Erica, we're always being told as the working class that we are the ones who have to sacrifice for the common good. Yet we never seem to always be asking the millionaires and the billionaires, the Epstein class, to make similar sacrifices whatsoever. It's time that we start running on an agenda to make sure that the Epstein class is sacrificing for this country, a country that has made them very, very wealthy. And vote on this week's Left of Lansing poll, both on Twitter and on YouTube. I'll compile the scores there, but the question is, do you support the Invest in My Kids ballot proposal? Yes or no? I'll report on those results next week. And I'd just like to make this quick announcement before this week's last call. I've started Left of Lansing. I think you've heard me bring it up a few times in the past month or so. I've started a Left of Lansing Patreon page, and I've included a way for you to donate to the show from right there. And I will provide a link where you can just make a $5 donation because you know what? This is independent media. I'm not backed by some conglomerate. I'm not corporate radio or corporate podcasting or anything like that. It's just me. It's just some guy recording in his Gratiot County attic, talking about politics, talking about progressive politics, and trying just to connect as many people throughout the state of Michigan and the country on a progressive message for working class change. And I love doing it. I do. Or else I wouldn't be doing this every week, although I am taking next week off. But if you do like the show and like the message that you hear each and every week from the show and like the guests that I bring on, or even if you disagree with some of my takes and some of my philosophies, but still love that I'm presenting a viewpoint that, you don't get to hear in corporate media a whole lot, then I'd be in your debt if you could just leave that little $5 donation. If anything, I just like to be able to pay for the cost of the recording equipment and programming that I'm using here on a yearly basis. I mean, I'll tell you what, and I'm being honest, that would really go a long way in helping this little project out that I started a couple of years ago. And I love always getting to hear from you. I love knowing that you're liking some of what I'm saying, or even if you're disagreeing with me, I love that you spend time just to email me and let me know of your feelings. And that's great as well. I'm doing this because I was never allowed a chance to say what I wanted to say on corporate right-wing radio in different parts of Michigan. This is my first time I get to be the true Pat Johnston here, and I love that Left of Lansing has given me that avenue and is also helping, again, connect the progressive movement through all parts of the state. So visit Left of Lansing's Patreon page, and again, I will provide a link to that page wherever you are listening here this week. Time now for the Left of Lansing Last Call. Well, Michigan Democratic State Representative from Detroit, Karen Whitsett, will not run for re-election in 2026. Finally, thankfully, she's out of here. And it was sad that she was even holding that seat to begin with. And I have to tell you, and I'm being honest here, the most gratification I received since the 2024 election is when Democratic socialist Denzel McCampbell beat Karen Whitsett for a seat on the Detroit City Council last year. And what made it even more beautiful is how Denzel McCampbell beat Karen Whitsett not once, but twice. He beat her once in a close primary and then winning in convincing fashion in the general election. And that allowed Denzel McCampbell to become the second Democratic socialist to join the Detroit City Council, which means that there's yet another seat representing the working class. Now, Karen Whitsett never, ever cared about Detroiters, and she didn't care about working class Michiganders. She only cared about herself, and that's why she tried to use her name recognition to grab that city council seat. Karen became an enemy to the working class, an enemy for what progressives and even Democrats, establishment Democrats, say they fight for every day. Not that former Democratic House Speaker Joe Tate needed any help blowing up the 2024 lame duck session by blocking powerful progressive legislation like polluter pay, and instead decided to pass bills granting tech bros massive corporate welfare by we, the Michigan taxpayers. But Karen Whitsett played a key role in ensuring working-class bills like polluter pay would never receive a vote in the state house. She refused to show up for important votes during that lame duck, and MAGA Republicans, they jumped for joy. And you know what? Let's be honest, I believe some corporate Democrats in Lansing jumped for joy as well. The Detroit News reports that Karen Whitsett missed 30 session days last fall because, well, why would she? What was the point of showing up? She's never truly represented the working class in Detroit, so why start now? Why would she care about her fellow Michiganders at all? It's very Trump-like. Just be there for the grift. She chose to side with the corporate lobbying wing in Lansing, and in doing so, she chose to sound more like a MAGA Republican. Now, Karen Whitsett claims that she's leaving because the Democratic Party platform doesn't mix well with her Christian faith. And Whitsett said, that conviction includes the issues I cannot reconcile with Scripture, abortion, the normalization of the gay lifestyle, and the push to redefine gender. And then Karen Whitsett said, love for people does not require agreement with sin, and compassion does not give us permission to rewrite Scripture. Very anti-Jesus, if I'd say. I mean, what Jesus does Karen Whitsett follow? Because I don't recall Jesus saying anything against gay people ever once. He did speak out against greed, and he did say to clothe the stranger, though. And let's not forget how Karen Whitsett visited Dear Leader's White House during COVID to claim that hydroxychloroquine, that horse deworming medication, cured her of COVID, which was pure insanity. And don't forget that Karen Whitsett voted against an abortion rights bill that would have ended the hideous 24-hour waiting period for women to get abortions here in Michigan, and she voted against allowing Medicaid to be used for women to get abortions, women who don't have the means to afford abortions. Because when in doubt, Karen, when in doubt, make women suffer. That is always the bottom line, right, Karen? Now, thankfully, a Michigan Court of Claims eventually struck down that 24-hour waiting period. And that was a law, let me remind you, that was a law foisted upon Michigan women by Christian nationalists. And that's who Karen Whitsett is siding with. Karen claims that she's stepping down from public office to follow Scripture and to follow Jesus Christ. Well, Christ, Karen, will teach you a lot about caring for the least in society. And you're going to have to find out that Jesus never once talked about abortion. Wait till you learn that little nugget of information. But you'll also learn that Jesus did talk about the first being the last and how Jesus chased capitalists from the temple. Oh, you're going to learn a lot about where you went wrong, Karen. You hurt a lot of people during these last few years. I hope Jesus does show you the way. Goodbye, clown.
You're listening to Left of Lansing. Music for the show and everything else on Left of Lansing is provided by Wanderbeats. To hear the latest project and complete music archives, check out Space Leopard on your favorite streaming site or subscribe to Space Leopard on YouTube. Now, back to our favorite progressive voice in Michigan. It's Pat Johnston.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of The Left of Lansing. Special thanks to Erica Payne from Patriotic Millionaires for being on the show again. I will provide a link so you can read up on their money agenda, and they've got plenty of great ideas on that money agenda to help revive the working class and even up the playing field to ensure that the Epstein Class finally does a little sacrificing. And don't forget to vote on this week's weekly poll. Do you support the Invest in My Kids ballot proposal? You can vote on either Left of Lansing's YouTube page or on the Twitter Twitter page. I'll share the results next week. Speaking of next week, I am off, but I'll still leave you with a Monday Musing and Friday Short, but I'll be out and about. But don't worry, because when I return in 2 weeks, and this will happen, all right? This will happen. Livingston County progressive fighter and strong progressive voice, Casey Helton, will be on the show. We were hoping to have her on this week, but logistically, it just couldn't happen. But she promises to stop by here in 2 weeks and has guaranteed it, okay? So I'm looking forward to speaking with Casey Helton here in a couple of weeks. Let me know what you think of the show or what was said here this week by emailing me, leftoflansing@gmail.com, or leave comments on my socials or on YouTube. And when I come back, I guess we'll have to see what stage of Armageddon we'll be in. Until then, take the battle to them. Thank you, Michigan.
You've been listening to Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Left of Lansing was produced by Pat Johnston, brainstormed by Pat Johnston, researched by Pat Johnston, written by Pat Johnston, edited by Pat Johnston, and yes, hosted by Pat Johnston. Technical assistance by Dr. Heather. Thanks to our good friend Rich for website assistance, and thanks to our good friend Kirsten for the awesome podcast logo. We thank Audio Boom for publishing the podcast every week. Visit leftoflansing.com for more news and information. Thanks again for listening to Michigan's premier progressive podcast, and we'll talk with you again next week.